Well, good afternoon or welcome for lunch, and thank you all for joining us here today. We've got a good crowd. We've got some wonderful discussion that will take place in a little while. I think I've got a lot of favorable comments about General Morrison's discussion this morning with you, so thank you for that. I know there's a little bit of hesitancy to get it started, but once it started, it kind of flowed, and it flowed very well. So thank you very much for the questions. I know he appreciated them, and he asked me to extend his thanks, and he looks forward to seeing many of you and working with you in the future. All right. So at this time, please welcome to the stage Colonel Robert Ney, the District Chaplain, to provide an invocation for the meal.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I invite you to pray with me. Father God, we thank you for this day that you have made. We thank you for this food. We ask that you bless the hands that prepared it, that have served us, and be with them, Lord. Lord, we thank you for this community that has gathered here. Bless our conversations, bless our speakers, and the questions that are asked. Lord, may we continue this ongoing relationship. Lord, we pray for our nation. We pray for our leadership, the President, Congress, the courts. We pray for unity within our land. And Lord, as you prepare our hands for war, we pray for peace. We pray this in your most holy name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, while we begin to serve your entrees, please direct your attention to the stage as we make a special award presentation. Please welcome to the stage Lieutenant General Bill Bender, U.S. Air Force, retired, AFCEA's Chairman of the Board, and Tina Jordan, Vice President for Membership.
And we're going to have you two stand right over here.
We are a well-oiled machine.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please go ahead and enjoy your lunch during this presentation, but I would ask that you refrain from conversation so that we can fully focus on and recognize the achievements of this amazing group of individuals. It is my pleasure to present to you today the AFCEA 40 Under 40 award winners. Would all of the 40 Under 40 award winners who are with us today please come from the audience and stand to my stage right. This award is given to 40 individuals under the age of 40 for their significant contributions to technical STEM fields by providing innovation, thought leadership, and support to their client or organization through the use of information technology. You can find the names of the 40 award winners on the screens and also on the awards section of the AFCEA website. Today, we will recognize a number of these 40 Under 40 award winners who are able to be with us in person. As I call off each name, each of the award winners will come up, walk across the stage, and be greeted by General Shea and General Bender. I would ask that you please hold your applause until all of the names are announced. And then at the end, we will join together to give them a huge round of AFCEA applause. Award winners, when you exit the stage, if you would please wait on that side, because when we're done, we're going to bring you all back on stage for a group photo. So again, please hold your applause as I welcome to the stage the 2021 AFCEA 40 Under 40 award winners, starting with Jennifer Bonner from Riva Solutions. Next is Jimmy Chu from Strategic Consulting. And Sean Cressman, Diligent Consulting. David Fries, Praxis Engineering. Aaron Horrell, IT Intelligent Waves, LLC. Andrew Howard, Huntington Ingalls Industries. Marcus Hutchinson, Intelligent Waves, LLC. Caitlin Johnson, Input Technology Solutions. Adam Koros, PEO Digital. Marita Morovitz from MITRE. Bryant Noel Fearless. Douglas Orellana Mantek. Casey Ortowski Jacobs. David Peterson, Axiologic Solutions. Sarah Ruiz, Administration for Community Living. Danny Sava Jacobs. Unishi Scott, Fleet Cyber Command. And Chris Wilkinson, DLT. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in an AFCEA round of applause for all of our winners. If I could please invite the award winners back to the stage. Thank you all for your hard work and dedication to your field. We are honored to have you as AFCEA's 40 Under 40 award winners, and we look forward to seeing what you accomplish next in the future. So while we take this group photo, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and please enjoy your lunch, and we'll come back to the stage shortly for the afternoon's presentation. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, lunch will now be served, and our presentation from Admiral Chase and Del Foster will begin shortly. Thank you.
What order do you want them? Red? Red?
I don't know, I guess chasing the mill. point, God made steps.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Lieutenant General Bob Shea.
Well, good afternoon again, and I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to finish, please continue to eat while we're going through the process here and going through the discussion. I'd now like to introduce today's luncheon speakers: Rear Admiral Bill Chase, the current Deputy Commander of Joint Force Headquarters Department of Defense Information Network, and Wendell Del Foster, JFHQ DODIN's Executive Director. Their conversation will be facilitated by Brigadier General Paul Fredenberg, retired, one of Admiral Chase's predecessors at Joint Force Headquarters DODIN, and currently, and we're happy to say that, currently FC is Executive Vice President for Defense and National Security. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you, General Shea, and good afternoon to everyone. I as well hope you've enjoyed your meal, but haven't eaten too much that you will fall asleep during this session. But I don't think you will, because we have two very distinguished individuals here that are in the heart of the command and control of the security operations and defense of the DODIN, or the Defense DOD Information Network. And so we're very glad to have you both here. Know you both very well, and really looking forward to the conversation. Just a little bit of a background for Bill Chase, Rear Admiral Chase. He's started as a naval aviator with several sea tours in the Arabian Gulf, Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and then became an information professional in the Navy, commanded in Guam with the John C. Stennis Strike Group, served out at Indo-Pacific Command as a Deputy J6, and more recently as a flag officer, the director of the Joint Staff J6, and then his previous position prior to coming to Joint Force Headquarters DODIN was the Deputy Principal Cyber Advisor to the Secretary of Defense. So again, thank you for being here. And Mr. Foster, a member of our senior executive service, he's the Executive Director for Joint Force Headquarters DODIN, a retired Marine officer, and with multiple combat deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and North Africa. Del has held civilian positions with the U.S. Cyber Command J3 and as the Marine Forces Cyber Command Director of the Advanced Capabilities Directorate. So welcome to you both, and I wanted to give you each just a couple of minutes to set the stage before we get into the real serious questions. But Bill, why don't we start off with you?
Sure. One, thank you for having us here. It's great to see a good turnout. I definitely want to find out what's on the menu that drug everybody in, because it's great to have a big audience. I want to talk a little bit about some of the DODIN vision. General Skinner signed out a new one here a couple days ago. Many of you that have listened to some of the presentations have had a chance to hear about the DISA vision. But for DODIN, JFHQ DODIN is a component command under U.S. Cyber Command, charged with the operations, security, maintenance, and defense of the DOD networks. And so with a new vision to be postured for today's competition and ready for tomorrow's fight, there are three strategic focus areas that General Skinner set forth for DODIN to try and take us to the next level. First of which is streamlining command and control, and you've heard lots about that, and we'll, I'm sure, get into some more of this. But really that's as much about organizing our battle space in terms of to reach the command and control needed to reach all the way down to the terrain and all the way back up for Cyber Command to execute their UCP responsibilities. The second one of those is optimizing technology. We've got a lot of history of, hey, box delivery does not make a capability, so what is actually required to optimize the technologies that industry partners bring to bear, and how do we make them most effective in posturing for command and control of the DODIN? And then I'll turn over to Del for the other two pieces.
Certainly, thank you very much. Yeah, so the other piece, or the third piece, I should say, is harnessing the power of partnerships. And I know it sounds cliche, But partnerships are imperative for mission success. We certainly realize at Joint Force Headquarters DODIN that we cannot do this by ourselves. It will take a whole of DOD effort to leverage our collective resources and strengths, talents, and authorities. And so we will require also support from private industry and academia in terms of innovation, research, and talent development. And also the fourth element of the vision is to cultivate change and talent management. And this is really about maturing our workforce to our next phase. Initially, obviously, we took a lot of folks from other AFSCs, MOSs, if you will, and we kind of said, hey, you are cyber folks. So now we're growing up our first generation all the way through career cyber operators. So maturing the force for our new cyber operations domain so to make sure we have the right mix of diversity of thought.
Well, thank you. So I'd like to start off with the C2. Yesterday, General Skinner talked about the scope of the C2 challenge in Joint Force Headquarters DODIN. He mentioned 45 different areas of operation within the DODIN, and he also mentioned that C2 was a focus of and a no-fail mission. How are you focusing on improving this C2 and organizing your battle space for the DODIN?
So I think the first part in getting to all the 45 different organizations, that includes the 4 services, but includes a lot of the defense agencies that don't have quite as big a footprint. But as we move out on, we have a lot of terrain to be had out there. To quote, I think, Douglas Adams from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's really big. So when you look at all those, how do you get your arms around it? And so we've had to take a comprehensive look at the entirety of the terrain, make sure we understand, pick a spot, who's the owner of it, and what is its relative importance to what we're trying to do. So as you look at the terrain we need to move out of, simply the enterprise networks, look at SCADA systems, ICS, our SAP networks, weapon systems, critical infrastructures, our partner networks. So we've had to take a fairly expansive look, more so than we have in the past, to make sure that we understand if we're trying to protect something and we get intelligence that says this is a problem for us, how do we make sure that the most important elements of the Department of Defense are in fact protected, safeguarded, and have appropriate maintenance done quickly so to protect the mission that they're really trying to drive. And the second part of that is taking a comprehensive look at the forces we have. So we've been involved over the last couple of years in operationalizing cyber support providers, cybersecurity support providers, but we also needed to turn to the NetOps side where we're doing access control and configuration management. A lot of talk right now about zero trust, but zero trust is a large journey that we're going to be on for a while. We need to make sure that we have the defense in depth required to put those pieces in place for a more granular level there. And then finally, we want to get to the mission part, a comprehensive look there. JFHQ DODIN not only directs things, but we integrate and synchronize in order to be able to support every one of the combatant commands, combat agencies, et cetera. So what we really want to get to is cyber risk to mission. Which risk and which mission? And the truth is we often have many going on simultaneously, and we also want to be able to shift our posture to be able to refocus when a different priority is taking place. And so that requires us to look at the command and control of the people we're supporting and what is it that they need and what do they feel is important. And so when a threat comes against the Department of Defense, how do we pivot to make sure that the most important thing at the time gets service? Keep the main thing the main thing.
Del, any other additions?
Hey, thanks, sir. The only thing I would add is, as we look at the complexity of the problem set, you have to go back to the origin, right? So the DODIN evolved decades before we stood it up as a warfighting domain. So the network owners, what we now call, DAO commanders and directors, were funded and they built the networks as they saw fit in order to accomplish their mission with no mind towards C2. So once we established it as an operational domain, we inherited a very complex C2 problem set. And so if we had to do it all over again, we would never have built the DODIN the way it currently is, but we have to fight the DODIN as it currently is with a mind towards making it more effective in the future. So, and that's what Joint Force Headquarters DODIN is stood up to do. So I just would add that piece as well.
Great. Kind of continuing along that same lines, the other thing we've heard, and it's clearly part of our theme here, but we've heard the phrase velocity and action to win. The words agility and velocity again. What do these words mean, and how do they apply in a continuously competitive environment like the one we face in cyberspace today?
I think it really starts with the environment. This year in particular, we've seen a number of commoditized malware attacks, supply chain attacks. This is the arms race of our time in cyberspace. So how do we posture for that and not knowing necessarily what's coming? Well, it is best if you can know what's coming and what's being weaponized. So the first of that begins with making sure our partnerships are in place and that we can receive great intelligence both from the IC as well as commercial threat intelligence to be able to pivot to what is traditionally the next step in a tactics, techniques, or procedures way. Making sure that we can signal down to all of those 45 different areas of operation. Here's what we're seeing. You need to take care of cyber maintenance on these following things in this priority order. So first and foremost, making sure that we are postured to be threat informed. And then I think some of those is that we service through the open internet and need to be able to access from off-prem. These are the areas that we need to focus on first because we have the least defense in depth on those, or at least in the cloud, it better be all there. So how do we pivot to those? And we need to start to automate these things because the threats certainly are.
Sir, yeah, I would just piggyback and say, clearly America has a pacing threat. And at its face value, everyone would assume that agility and velocity would mean early adoption of technology and jumping on the latest innovations in order to maintain pace with that adversary. But my answer is yes and, right? So it's yes, we need to have improvements in automation to get the human out the loop where a human doesn't need to be there, so we can take those humans and get them doing things that only humans can do. We realize we can't out-manpower this, this issue. So we need to be better at automation. Also, advances in artificial intelligence, machine learning need to take place as well in order to allow us to have that agility and that velocity. Additionally, the implementation of those new capabilities needs to be holistic, a holistic look. How do we actually implement those, make sure we're baking in operational considerations from start to finish, and making sure we have a good MLPF solution before we actually use those new capabilities. But I believe that part of the crux of agility and velocity really has to do with cyber situational awareness, our ability to see ourselves, our forces, our terrain, and can we maneuver and respond to intrusions quickly? Are we being proactive? Do we know our adversary, and are we able to respond to threats? So both proactively and, of course, when we see an intrusion, react in a reactive mindset. So I think that is really a good part of the basis of being able to be more agile and also to have velocity. And that doesn't require just tools, but it's people, right people, processes, and tools in order to do that.
And it really means we need to have thought through a number of the pre-planned responses we have for certain things that we know are probably coming. We may not know where they are, but for instance, if we're supporting a COCOM, understanding what's important to them, at which phase, once this is passed in time and space, what comes next, and turning those in and waiting for them to happen is not where we want to be. So we want to turn those into pre-planned responses. And so I think that speaks to a lot of the agility and making sure that we move with velocity. It means it has a direction and we know where we're heading next.
All right, so I'm gonna draw this thread a little bit more, and there's been a lot of conversation here about the move towards JADC2 and the imperative to do that across the Department of Defense. And you talked about it's not just a technology solution here, but the implementation or the operationalization of that technology to the mission, aligned to the mission. And there's a huge requirement of both of those things to implement a JADC2 that is truly joint, in nature. How does your headquarters, fit into this as we move to the JADC2?
Sure. JADC2 was founded around the idea of commanders making decisions and what things they need to know to make the right decisions in a timely fashion. So as Del pointed out, it starts with a little bit of situational awareness, knowing what's important for various missions. And I think as we try and look to fit into that part, it starts to look for us like it's a big data problem because there's a lot of data out there. But that doesn't mean we want to drag it all back to our headquarters. We need to push the things out, and so we end up with a multi-tier, multi-echelon look at what are the things that are important to be made locally, and then at maybe an operational level of fleet or all the way up to a COCOM, what decisions do they need to make, and how do we help facilitate those? It is certainly, I know there's been a lot of discussion in the JADC2 realm about data and getting data structures and the whole fabric. So it's less about the data itself. It's very important. What it's really important is getting the data flow to the commanders that need it when they need it, and having thought through that. And if you turn it into a pre-planned response that I talked about, it starts to identify that data and how do we get that in a pipeline from not just the person who's going to defend against it locally, but to get it upline to say, if this is now overcome, what is the next step? How do commanders move forces and have the levers to get their intent drawn out? Those are kind of two big areas of one, moving into a big data world, and then two, making sure that we're in fact enhancing their C2, because in our supporting role, that's what it's all about. Back to your C2 streamlining question. We get lots of comments about pick your theater. It's the cyber C2 is always confusing to everybody unless perhaps you're in it. How do we streamline that and make it most important parts very clear to everybody involved?
One thing I would add is that obviously at the crux, JADC2 would be the ability to visualize the terrain and the battlefields so commanders can make timely and appropriate decisions. So, but there's an end-to-end, right? So at the tip of that is to have the right sensors, as Admiral Chase said, and to understand what questions that the commander wants to answer, and therefore what data you need to collect to answer those questions, and then on the analytical side, how do you ask the data those particular questions? I think to make sure all that is in place end to end to help feed into the ultimate goal of a JADC2 is also part of our requirement on more of a technical capabilities part of it as well.
And as you might imagine, DISA is our closest partner on this because they've got the DISN core, and how do you connect all those pieces? What's that going to look like as the services and others bring that down to a tactical level and connect those pieces? Well, we need to start wrapping in things like encryption, transport, resiliency, and how do we build on all those pieces? So it's very much a tag team where we're trying to set, here's what we think COCOMs we need to know to be able to show an entire picture to whoever the warfighter is at that particular moment. And those need to go into the design elements on the DISA side. And so we've got a very strong partnership, and it's continuing to grow stronger as we really identify the parts that matter. And it's all about the teamwork that happens from the mission owner all the way back to the designer of how it's being integrated.
All right, we'll continue again. All this fits together, but Dale, you've been getting off easy here. I want to shoot a question straight to you, but there's been also conversation, and Mr. Inglis brought it up yesterday about workforce talent management and how this was really a national challenge. But it underpins Joint Force Headquarters DODIN's ability. General Morrison brought it up today about how do we leverage, operationalize CSSPs. But what would you consider the most important steps to develop, optimize, and retain, this workforce that's required for our, current, cyber operations that are required?
Certainly, General. Yeah, so I keep in mind always when I think about this question that, the cyberspace domain is only 12 years old, right, as a domain. And as I said earlier, we haven't even seen our first commander of a cyber operations unit that actually grew up as a cyber operator, so or a senior enlisted or whatever. So I think that's part of it, right? Initially we took a whole bunch of IT professionals and some crippies and some SIG-ers and threw them in and said, voila, you are now cyber. And they've done a great job bringing us to where we are and moving the whole cyber ops forward. But in order to get to the next phase, I think to making sure that we are developing folks who not understand the technical side of cyberspace operations, but also understand warfighting and joint planning and those things because it is an actual warfighting domain. So to make sure the schoolhouse has those things threaded in so we can mature our military workforce. On the flip side, on the civilian, in order to be able to recruit and retain a good civilian workforce, we need to partner with academia in order to make sure that they understand the difference between information technology management, cybersecurity, and cyber operations as we see it as a DOD. And to have a training pipeline that allows us to be able to, pluck a guy who's coming out of, said university who understands cyber operations at that level, so we can retain those folks as well. So I think it's a combination, a little bit of patience in some regards, but also while we're waiting, we're also influencing our military schoolhouses, working with our civilian partners.
Anything to add to that, Bill?
Certainly on the, I think one of the most important parts is meaningful work. And so giving people, removing as much of the bureaucracy that we can, defining the work roles a little better. We've done a poor job of that, I think, as this has grown in a bit of a, it just happened sort of way. But we're getting better at defining what those things are and saying what matters, and so that people come away with a sense of satisfaction. I think we're going to see that grow as we address the cultural aspects of that we're talking about in the vision. So,
very good. All right, I'd like to see if we go to the back of the room. Are there any questions from the audience? If not, I have many more questions.
There are no questions at this time.
Then I'm gonna continue on. You're stuck with me.
okay.
All right. So the other thing that's been a major topic of conversation is the implementation of zero trust. And the president's executive order, the DOD CIO zero trust architecture. This is Thunderdome, which has been discussed greatly in the last couple of days here, are all zero trust efforts. Similar to the JADC2, what is Joint Force Headquarters DODIN role in implementation, or I would say a critical aspect of this is the operationalization of the zero trust architecture?
So I think, well, two things. One, it's going to take, those are principles, and it's going to take a long time to put many of those in place. The industry partners that have accomplished something near zero trust have done those over the better part of a decade, some cases longer. So what that means to us in the first place is we have a system that's built around security enclaves, protect the border. We need to shine the light more on the inside of what we actually have and understand where those pieces are, be able to enumerate those. We can't give up on that just yet. One of the common questions that we've asked ourselves at the DODIN headquarters is, what are the things that we want to care about in this? And I think it really boils down to, well, we want to make sure that all 7 decisions involved in zero trust happen. 2 of those about the user, 2 of those about the data itself, 2 of those about the device they're accessing. The 2 things in each of those is both an understanding of what it is, so an authentication and then followed by an authorization. Is that acceptable risk to us based on the way it's coming? And so as we try and think about, well, what does everything look like in a world of cloud and BYOD, even for the military? How do we access those resources ubiquitously? What are the questions we need to put in place? What are the cybersecurity aspects we need to put into the cloud? I think we're all around, less so about the endpoint, but more so about what's the cybersecurity requirement at the point of that delivery of the service. It becomes very important to us as the cyber securing folks and defending. What censoring do we need to make alongside the cloud or cloud native? Those are the questions that I think we're seeing the most of, and we certainly depend a lot on industry to help us with some of those questions, because we have not grown up this way and we don't think about it typically this way. So we get a lot of help from our industry partners there, as well as our civilian side, because the military have not grown up like this yet.
Nothing to add on to that one. That's great.
These are 2 large undertakings that are going to require a lot of effort, I think, in coordination and synchronization through the headquarters. Let me make sure that I don't know if we've flashed the screen up with where the audience can text their questions. I just want to make sure that they know where to go, and there may be a microphone here somewhere too, that if any. But I want to make sure the audience gets involved and has an opportunity to ask questions here. Have you gotten any questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
For Rear Admiral Chase, how will JFHQ DODIN work with DISA's Emerging Technology Directorate to harness automation and AI for protecting the DODIN?
As much as humanly possible, because it really is important, because the scope and scale of we just can't compete with this. understanding what's important and baking in the things that we say are important, and then what are the things that we need to be able to know on an ongoing basis. So as we talked about commanders making decisions, those happen at various levels of the staff. What decisions does our J3 need to be able to understand and do on a daily basis? So we've talked as recently as this morning about, hey, you're more than welcome to come shadow us to be able to understand what a day in the life looks like and give us some insights as what we already know we can do better and what are some of the areas that you're exploring maybe to solve some of our harder problems and the things that hurt our head on an ongoing basis. We talked about, if we just concentrate on the defensive part, the best we'll ever do is break even, and it's really hard to be postured for, options and pre-planned responses. So I think those are areas that as we get into high volumes of data, which we will see, how do we leave most of those at the forward edge in the hands of the people that have to defend against them? What do we need to bring back? And then how do we tip and cue the decisions that once we know we need to make them, what are the data sources that need to feed it and give us the best answer or the best options? I think those are areas where we can really tip and cue off one another.
With the DODIN being so large, how is JFHQ DODIN focusing on critical assets of AOs to defend and support?
So there's a lot of things we don't have visibility of right now, and so that's one of the things we're trying to tackle. ICS, SCADA, all the platform integration technologies that we can't see here. So when we put out, here's a threat that we know to be against DOD networks, how do we be very specific about those? In some cases where they don't have classified networks to receive the highly classified data, but how do we reach them quickly and be able to move on some of those? So first step is shining the light. It's hard to make a decision on something you can't actually see. And particularly for the folks that we support, we are finding there may be 16 or 17 different areas of operation that support, say, a combatant command mission. How do we stitch those together and show them to them so that they can see it in a cogent way and make the decision to pre-position other real-world troops, ships, aircraft, et cetera, to be able to neutralize a threat?
Del, you mentioned, just to follow that thread a little bit, because it is important, you mentioned in your opening comments about optimizing technology.
Yes.
And understanding some of the gaps here, what are the current efforts underway that you're leveraging technology to help get after this?
Sure, thanks. Excuse me, sorry. So I think when we talk about automation and optimizing technology, I think I would harp again on one of my earlier comments. I think one of the keys is, as we go back to how do we gain and maintain cyber situational awareness, and all of our capability needs and have been kind of tied back to that, how we get cyber SA. So cyber SA requires the ability to sense, as we said, aggregate relevant data about our terrain, our vulnerabilities, adversary, our blue forces, and our current operations. And that data needs to be further analyzed and then put into some kind of format where it can be visualized by a human to make appropriate and timely decisions, i.e. a commander. So Joint Force Headquarters DODIN is working with our higher headquarters, U.S. Cybercom, in order to, and the JICWA Management Office, in order to make sure we have our mission threads prioritized. So we have what we call our DODIN validation mission threads that are being sent to the Unified Platform PMO that talk about our needs for sensing, aggregating that data. And then we also have what we call our SODCOP, Secure, Operate, Defend, Common Operational Picture mission threads, which have been submitted to the JCC2 Program Management Office in order to have those prioritized so we can actually not only get the visibility, but then we also get the visualization that we talked about in order to gain and maintain that cyber situational awareness. And also beginning in FY23, we anticipate funds across the FIDP for two other initiatives, our automated continuous assessment capability, which would be more of an enterprise solution that would provide every DAO the opportunity to see their own vulnerabilities and hopefully mitigate those internal. And then we also have our Internet Operations Management capability we baselined as well, which allows us to detect and track our internet-facing assets and the vulnerabilities that are aligned to those. So those are some of the things that we currently have going on.
Yeah, the Joint Cyber Warfighting Architecture, the JICWA that Cybercom's putting together, making sure that's federated in a proper way to get the multi-echelon tiering happen is an area we've spent a lot of time on, and we're using a couple of COCOMs to be good use cases to make sure it's getting, they're getting what they want out of it as well as what we are as well, and they're able to stitch together that picture. And this is where the big data is actually coming into play, and what are the views that we actually need? How do we build the data pipelines to go down to the tactical asset and feed up to the combatant commands?
Back for more questions.
Our reliance on connectivity makes for many enhanced capabilities, but do we need to prepare and train for having to return to an analog fighting mode if adversaries deny us access to those digital capabilities?
We absolutely need to be able to operate in a resilient way, and I think this is something from my Navy heritage too. How do we, when disconnected, how do we at least have the capability to fight organically? So this is what I meant when I said we have to have the views, and every unit has to be able to defend itself, and we need to make sure that we're not trying to haul all of their, the only people that have the picture are sitting here in the Beltway or the NCR to do that. So making sure that the resiliency is baked in and denied degraded environments. We know that this is how the next fight is going to be, and it's going to be how do we make the best sense locally of the picture and the environment around us. Whoever can do that faster will have the advantage. So this is very much part of our planning factors that we're putting into our requirements documentation. Great question. Anything to add there, Del?
No, that's perfect, yeah. That's good, thank you.
Queuing off Lieutenant General Morrison's talk this morning, has JFHQ DODIN established a clear delineation with other CSSPs for incident response and incident escalation?
Yes. What we're trying to do, we're going back and actually making sure we've got having fully defined everything. Here's what we actually expect CSSPs to be able to do. We're trying to baseline all of those things, and because we're finding a lot of differences among them, and this is one of the part of the cultures, and how do we go back and straighten that out, get the standardization in place so that we can actually get everything being equal to one another, and how do we build that out? So we have not only doing that for the CSSPs, but for the NetOps community, and making sure, because those two communities of practice, if there's anomalies on our networks today, do not identify themselves as threat-related or configuration-related. We have to figure that out. So making sure that things don't drop in the cracks is probably the most important thing, and one of our more insidious tasks to ensure that it doesn't happen. So making a full list of everything that we expect somebody who instantiates terrain to then what's the ownership, what does that mean to own it, and then how do we give that good tenancy requirements. If you're going to be on the DODIN, here's the whole list of things we expect you to be able to do. The authorizing official, the RMF community has been has described this fairly in depth. On the operations side, it turns out we haven't. So making sure those are written down, and we say take a comprehensive view of the forces. This is one of the things we're going back and actually doing that homework to operationalize not just CSSPs, but to operationalize the NetOps forces as well. So we have a common set of definitions, a common understanding, which I think will speed how we look at things and give us the ability to pre-plan things. Oh, we got the hook out. 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
One final question. The current C2 portfolio is mostly legacy-based. DevSecOps is a key enabler to modernize C2 systems. Army Futures Command is trying to develop soldier-led software factory. How does that effort align with JADC2?
For JADC2, I think very much so. I mean, the services are I don't doubt that the services will develop the things that they need and bring AI to bear, and Armies in their Project Convergence has been very explicit about that. How tying them together across multiple domains, figuring out where they're going to generate a lot of data just to do that on a tactical battlefield. How much of that actually needs to leave, their tight tactical bubble and needs to go to the next echelon is where I think DISA, DODIN start to play in this, and how it ties back into JADC2. Making sure the destination question, just because we can generate data at the tactical level doesn't mean we should send it all to the combatant commander. directly, but rather figure out how do we tie together our, the word COP was going to come to mind, but I don't like COP because there's nothing common about a common operational picture. It very much depends on where you sit. What I think we should be focusing on is what are the views that we should all have in common, particularly when it comes to things like NC3 and making sure that we're all talking about the exact, very precise terminology as we make command and control, fire, don't fire sort of decisions on whether to engage adversaries. So those are super important in the command and control chain. But separating, allowing the services to do what they need to do on their own is something I think we've probably need to do, avoid a few more of the 2,000-mile screwdrivers and allow them to have their own operating environment and then focus on the joint interoperability pieces. And this is both JADC2 and our DODIN problem. How do we make sure that things in common are common so that we can guarantee the interoperability? That's super important. Anything to add?
No, I was spot on. The ability to enable and empower those folks at the pointy end, not the 1,000-mile screwdriver was apropos. So no, that was great.
All right, one more question as we have just a couple of minutes left. The other theme that we have here is partnerships. And so I'd like to hear from you how you're leveraging partnerships for Joint Force Headquarters DODIN in new and innovative ways for the security operations and defense of the DODIN.
You want to start?
No, go ahead.
Probably starts, as I said, we don't want to start with break even, so our intelligence partnerships matter a lot, and first and foremost those Cybercom and NSA, followed by the broader IC and the interagency. The partnerships with industry, largely led through NSA, are turning out to be very important for us that help us out with the TTPs. Partnerships with DISA, we've sort of talked about, that one's very close. And how do we take that all the way out to the mission owners, largely combatant commands, but there are others that are mission partners there. And then literally our partners from other nations. There's a number of JADC2 efforts going on with a number of nations, so we won't go there, but we've got to look at what do we need to see from those pieces, what do we as a nation bring, and what are the common parts we need to have when we go into the foreign partner networks as well, and how do we make those meaningful to bring combatant command efforts as they're leading those. Working with a mission partner environment, the program office that's now in charge of doing that and taking what was Centrix and BICE's things and making those operationally relevant. These are areas of focus for us, but we're fairly nascent, to be honest, and trying to bring that into bear. But these are some of the things we've sort of roped in as we've taken the comprehensive look at terrain, the forces, and the mission.
I would just say, in addition to what Admiral Chase said, obviously we have partnerships with FFRDCs that we're working, so that they would be academia as well. But in addition to that, we have a new initiative where we're trying to develop more partnerships, or I should say, with universities that could do twofold. They could work on that curriculum that we talked about to be able to develop a DoD way curriculum for cyberspace operations to train, our civilian workforce in a way that that lays it out a little differently than the regular information technology management, cybersecurity type curriculum. So we have an initiative to begin that, and of course, the more traditional approach with academia in terms of having them look at some research and development issues for us as well, to say, hey, what is a good way forward to get after these problem sets, specifically data and how we look at data. Are we collecting the right data, how to transport the data, aggregate it, and the analytical part, ask it the right questions to get the answers back for the commanders. So other partnerships with academia as well.
Well, look at that, perfect timing. This has gone by very fast. There is a lot happening in this space. And I feel like we have a lot more to discuss, so we're going to have to do this again sometime.
Look forward to it.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your leadership. Really appreciate it, and thank you so much for having this conversation with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, and thank you all for listening.
And again, gentlemen, I echo General Fredenberg's comments, and thank you for being here and being very candid and open with your thoughts and your views on what's going on. And in lieu of a speaker gift, FC is going to make a donation to Fisher House on your behalf. So thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. I think it's important. You can see the crowd that stayed around, so I think they all recognize the criticality of the work that you do and the challenges that you have in front of you. So thank you again very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment we'll head to the exhibit hall for dessert break, supported by Dell Technologies. You can see the rest of the afternoon schedule again. I don't know if it's up on the screens or not, but they're certainly on the app. So we'll reconvene back here in this room at 3 o'clock for a panel on driving velocity in industry, moderated by Jason Martin. This is Component Acquisition Executive and Director of Digital Capabilities and Security Center. We'll then close the day with focused networking sessions and the Women AFCEA reception, both located on the 300 level. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Please enjoy your time here in the exhibit hall, and we'll see you back here at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Ciena helps agencies upgrade from legacy technologies, including SONET and TDM, to modern packet technologies, while continuing to meet complex mission demands. To learn more, visit ciena.com/government. Network modernization is critical to agency efficiency. Ciena's adaptive network can help